Let me tell you about the most stressful Tuesday afternoon of my friend Lewis's life. He'd just gotten his bonus, not a life-changing amount, $1,000 give or take. First real chunk of money he'd ever had sitting in his account that wasn't immediately earmarked for rent, groceries, or some bill he'd forgotten about. And instead of feeling good about it, he felt paralyzed. He called me, genuinely stressed, and said, "Bro, I don't know what to do with this. Do I put it in stocks, crypto, just leave it?" My cousin said gold, my uncle said property, my coworker said some app, and he just kept going. Name after name, opinion after opinion, all completely contradicting each other. And I remember sitting there thinking, this is exactly the problem. Not the money, the noise. My name is Adam, and honestly, I spend probably too much time thinking about money. Why some people build wealth almost quietly, without drama, without hustle porn motivation videos, while other people work just as hard and somehow never seem to get ahead. I've been down a lot of rabbit holes on this stuff, read a lot of books, made a lot of mistakes with my own money. And somewhere along the way, I started to notice patterns, not just in numbers and portfolios, but in the psychology of how people relate to money in the first place. And here's what I want to tell you today. If you've got your first $1,000 sitting somewhere and you genuinely don't know what to do with it, this video is for you. Not because I'm going to hand you some magic formula, but because by the end of this, you're going to understand something most people don't figure out until they've already lost money learning it the hard way. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about what to actually do with your first $1,000, the right way. First things first, before you invest a single cent, you need to understand what investing actually means for someone at your stage. Here's something nobody tells you when you're starting out. Investing is not a universal action. It's contextual. What's smart for someone with $500,000 in savings is completely different from what's smart for someone with $1,000. And I think a lot of people skip this step because they're so eager to be in the market that they jump straight to buying something without asking a more fundamental question. Am I even ready to invest? Let me explain what I mean. Imagine you're building a house. You wouldn't start with the roof, right? You'd start with the foundation. And the financial foundation, the thing that makes every other financial decision more stable, is an emergency fund. Now, I know. Every personal finance person talks about emergency funds, and it sounds boring and obvious. But hear me out, because there's a specific reason it matters right at this stage. If you invest your $1,000 and then your car breaks down, or you lose a few shifts at work, or your laptop dies, you're going to have to pull that money out. And when you pull money out of investments at the wrong time, one of two things happens. Either you sell at a loss, or you just break even at best. You've taken on risk without the safety net that makes risk manageable. Lewis, my friend from earlier, first thing I asked him was, "Do you have any savings for emergencies?" He didn't. So before we even talked about investing, we talked about that. He put $500 toward a small emergency fund, and then we looked at what to do with the rest. A rough rule of thumb, aim for 3 to 6 months of basic living expenses in a savings account before you start putting money into markets. If you're just starting out and $1,000 is genuinely all you have, consider splitting it. Maybe $500 or $600 goes toward building that cushion first. The rest you can start putting to work. It's not glamorous advice, but it's the advice that'll stop you from making panic decisions later. Okay, so let's say you do have some kind of cushion, or you're building one. Now what? This is why I want to talk about something called the investment ladder. And no, I didn't read that in a textbook, I just made up that name because it helps me explain it. The idea is simple. There's a logical order to where your money should go first, second, and third. And most people get this order wrong because they're thinking about returns before they're thinking about optimization. Here's the ladder, from bottom to top. First rung, high interest debt. If you have credit card debt with an interest rate of 20%, 25%, even 18%, paying that off is the single best investment you can make. And I'm not using the word loosely. If your debt costs you 20% a year and the stock market returns roughly 7 to 10% a year on average, the math is screaming at you. Paying off that debt is like earning a guaranteed 20% return. There is no investment on earth that gives you that, guaranteed with zero risk. So if you have high interest debt and you're thinking about putting $1,000 into stocks, I gently but firmly suggest pay the debt first, or at minimum, pay it down aggressively before doing anything else. Second rung, employer-matched retirement accounts. If your job offers any kind of retirement contribution match and you're not taking full advantage of it, you are literally leaving free money on the table. That match is an instant 50% or 100% return on your contribution depending on the plan. It's not sexy, it doesn't make for a great story, but it is objectively one of the best financial moves available to a regular person. Third rung, tax-advantaged accounts. Things like a Roth IRA if you're in the US or equivalent registered accounts depending on your country. These accounts let your investments grow either tax-free or tax-deferred, which sounds like accounting jargon until you realize it can literally translate to tens of thousands of dollars saved over the course of your investing life. And then finally, after all of that, comes the general brokerage account, the crypto wallets, the individual stock picks, the stuff that gets talked about on social media. Most people start at the top of that ladder and work their way down. The smart move is to start at the bottom. Now let's talk about the actual investing part, because this is where it gets interesting. Let's say your foundation is solid. You've got some emergency savings. Your debt situation is under control. You've maxed what you can into any employer match or tax-advantaged account, and now you have $500 or maybe the full $1,000 ready to actually invest. What do you buy? And this is where I want to introduce you to a concept that genuinely changed how I thought about all of this. It's called index fund investing. And it sounds complicated, but it is honestly one of the most elegant ideas in personal finance. Here's how it works. Instead of trying to pick individual stocks, like I think Tesla's gonna go up or I believe in Apple, an index fund just buys everything or close to it. It tracks a broad market index like the S&P 500, which is basically the 500 largest companies in the US. So when you buy one share of an S&P 500 index fund, you own a tiny piece of Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and 496 other companies, all at once. Why does this matter? Because here's the uncomfortable truth about stock picking. Even professional fund managers, people who do this full-time with research teams and Bloomberg terminals and decades of experience, fail to consistently beat the market average. Study after study shows that over a 10 to 15-year period, the majority of actively managed funds underperform the index. So if the professionals can't do it reliably, what are the chances that you or I, sitting at home with a brokerage app, are going to consistently outsmart the market? Not great. Honestly, not great. Index funds let you stop trying to beat the market and just be the market. You get average returns, which historically, over long periods, have been pretty remarkable. The S&P 500 has averaged roughly 10% annual returns over the last century, accounting for inflation and crashes and recessions and all of it. Now, $1,000 invested at 10% per year doesn't sound life-changing, and in year one, you're right, it's not. But this is where I need to talk to you about something called compounding, because I think people understand the concept, but don't really feel it until someone draws it out for them. Compounding is the closest thing to a financial superpower that actually exists. Let me put some numbers on this. If you invest $1,000 at age 25 and never add another dollar at 10% annual return, by age 65, that $1,000 becomes roughly $45,000. That's not from earning more money, that's from time. That's from letting returns generate their own returns, which generate their own returns, and so on. Now, what if instead of $1,000 once, you invested $100 a month consistently from age 25 to 65? At that same average return, you'd end up with somewhere north of $500,000 from $100 a month. The math isn't magic, it's just time. And the painful irony is that time is the one thing you can never get back. The $1,000 you invest at 25 is worth dramatically more than the $1,000 you invest at 45. Not because of the money itself, but because of how many years of compounding it gets. This is why starting now, even imperfectly, matters more than waiting until you have more money or more knowledge or more confidence. Lewis spent 3 months going back and forth about what to invest in. By the time he made a decision, he'd missed 3 months of compounding. Not a disaster, but, and I say this with love, a little bit of a waste. The best time to start was yesterday. The second best time is now. And the worst thing you can do is convince yourself you'll invest when you know more, because that's how people end up at 40 having never started. Let's talk about risk, because I think this word scares people more than it should, and for the wrong reasons. When most people think about risk in investing, they think about losing money. And yes, that's part of it. Markets go down. They have always gone down, periodically. That's not a bug, it's a feature. The volatility is part of why you get rewarded with returns in the first place. But here's what I think is an underrated form of risk that nobody talks about: the risk of doing nothing. If your money's sitting in a regular savings account earning 1% interest and inflation is running at 3 or 4%, you are technically losing purchasing power every single year. The number in your account might stay the same or grow slightly, but what that money can actually buy you is shrinking. That's also risk. Quiet risk, the kind that doesn't feel like a loss until 15 years later when you realize your savings have effectively lost a chunk of their real value. The question isn't whether to take risk. You're taking risk either way. The question is which risk is appropriate for your timeline and goals. If you're investing money you won't need for 10, 20, 30 years, short-term market dips are largely irrelevant. The stock market has recovered from every single crash in history: the Great Depression, the 2008 financial crisis, COVID. Every time it recovered and went on to new highs eventually. That doesn't guarantee the future, but it does put temporary losses in context. The issue is when people invest money they might need next year and then freak out when the market drops 20% and sell at the bottom. That's not the market failing you. That's a mismatch between the money's purpose and the investment vehicle. Short-term money, money you'll need in 1 to 3 years, probably shouldn't be in the stock market. Put it in a high-yield savings account or a money market fund. Long-term money, money you're not touching for a decade or more, can and probably should be exposed to market risk because that's where the real growth happens. All right, let's get practical. Here's what a sensible first $1,000 investment could actually look like. Step 1, open a brokerage account. If you're in the US, popular options include Fidelity, Vanguard, or Schwab, all reputable, all have no minimum index fund options. Other countries have their own equivalents. Look up what's available and regulated in your region. Step 2, buy a broad market index fund or ETF. Something like VOO, which tracks the S&P 500, or VTI, which tracks the total US stock market. Or if you want global exposure, VT includes international markets too. These all have very low expense ratios, meaning the fund charges you almost nothing to hold them, which matters a lot over the long run. Step 3, set up automatic contributions, even $50 or $100 a month on autopilot. This does 2 things. 1, it builds the habit of investing consistently. 2, it gives you something called dollar cost averaging, which basically means you're buying at different prices over time, so you don't have to stress about whether today is a good time to invest. Some months you'll buy high, some months you'll buy low. Over time, it averages out. Step 4, do not check it every day. I'm serious. This is harder than it sounds. When the market drops, your instinct will be to do something. Resist that instinct. Your job as a long-term investor is to stay in, not to react, not to time the market, just to stay in and keep buying. That's it. It's not complicated, it's not exciting, and honestly, that's kind of the point. Now, I do want to address the elephant in the room: crypto, individual stocks, and all the stuff that sounds more exciting than index funds. Look, I'm not here to tell you that you can never touch individual stocks or crypto. If you want to allocate a small portion of your portfolio, say 5 to 10% to higher risk, higher potential investments, that's a reasonable personal choice. Some people call this a fun money allocation or a satellite portfolio. But here's my honest take. That should only come after you've built the boring foundation. Index funds first, emergency fund first, debt managed first. Then, if you still have money and appetite for risk, you can experiment with individual bets. What I see too often, and what happened to several people I know, is someone with $1,000 puts the whole thing into a hyped up stock or a crypto token because they saw it on social media, it goes down 60%, and suddenly they're not just financially worse off, they're emotionally burned out on investing entirely. They feel stupid. They feel like investing is a scam, and they step back from it for years. That's the real cost. Not just the money lost, but the years of compounding they miss while they sit on the sidelines licking their wounds. Lewis actually had a version of this happen to him before the bonus situation. Put a few $100s into a meme stock at the peak. You can probably guess which one, and watched it basically evaporate. And it took him a long time to get back to thinking about investing seriously again. The boring path isn't boring because it's the only option, it's boring because it works. And working things don't need drama. One last thing I want to talk about, and this one's maybe the most important of all. Your biggest financial asset isn't your $1,000. It's not your index fund. It's not even your income, not directly. It's your financial literacy. Your understanding of money, how it works, how it grows, how it can be lost, how the system around you is designed. That's the thing that compounds just like money does. Every book you read on personal finance, every concept you properly understand, every mistake you understand before you make it, that's all compounding too. The person who starts investing with $1,000 and actually understands why they're doing it and what they're doing will, over 20 years, dramatically outperform the person who throws money at something they don't understand based on a tip from someone online. I'm not saying you need a finance degree. I'm saying take this stuff seriously enough to actually learn it. Not obsessively, not to the point where you're reading 12 books a year and spending every evening on investing forums. Just consistently. A book here, a video there. Build the knowledge slowly and it stacks up. The reason I think about money as much as I do isn't because I love spreadsheets. It's because I've seen what financial stress does to people. I've seen it affect relationships, health, confidence, the way people show up in their own lives. And I've also seen what a little bit of financial clarity does for people. The way it loosens something, the way it makes even ordinary days feel less like a treadmill. Your first $1,000 is a starting point, a signal to yourself that you're taking this seriously, that you're not just going to leave your financial future up to luck, or your employer, or whatever the economy decides to do. So let's bring it all back. What do you actually do with your first $1,000? You make sure your foundation is solid. Some emergency savings, high interest debt under control. You understand the investment ladder and move in the right order. You start with boring, diversified index funds rather than chasing excitement. You let time and compounding do the heavy lifting. You manage risk not by avoiding it, but by being honest about your timeline and your needs. And you commit to staying in the game, consistently, even when the market does something that makes your stomach drop. None of this is complicated, but it does require you to resist a lot of noise. The noise of people telling you there's a faster path, a smarter pick, a secret the banks don't want you to know. There's no secret. There's just discipline, patience, and starting sooner than you feel ready. Lewis, by the way, he did figure it out. Took him a bit. He's not rich yet, not even close. But he's got his emergency fund, he's got a Roth IRA, and every month a little bit more goes in automatically, almost without him thinking about it. He calls it his future self-fund, which I think is honestly a pretty good way to put it. You're not just investing money, you're investing in the version of yourself that exists 10, 20, 30 years from now. That person is going to look back at the decisions you make right now. Not with judgment, just with a kind of quiet gratitude. Or, depending on how things go, a very audible sigh of relief. Either way, start. Start now. Start with what you have. That's the move. I'll see you in the next one.